Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Most of my videos now are me outside walking around as opposed to the darkness of my home, which is where most of them came from before, although some not so dark. But anyway, in this video, I want to talk about something that was my biggest, and I guess I wouldn't say biggest, but my longest lasting fear, and something that still kind of plagues me to this day in different forms, and I'll get into that in the video. But before I get into it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, check out some prior content if you suffer from health anxiety or cardiophobia. I have a bunch of content on that, a bunch of videos about what I've been through, how I can relate to you, and ways to overcome it, and ways to put one foot in front of the other and start some momentum and go in the right direction instead of spiraling in the wrong direction. So with that being said, let's jump into this. And this symptom, or just, I guess, if you don't want to call it a symptom, but I guess the result of just having like an overly anxious system, or an overly alert nervous system, will lead to you having a fast overall resting heart rate. Now, obviously, we know that the standard scale for normal heart rate is anywhere from between 60 and 100 beats a minute. Now, I've been over that. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of traps that you could fall into also, which is that when you get anxious, normally the only time that you're checking your vitals most of the time is when you're anxious. I know a lot of times you are anxious all the time, which makes you check your vitals all the time, makes you check your vitals a lot. First and foremost, it's obviously not good, because you're looking for negative things, and you fall into the pattern of you're expecting to see negative numbers, you're anticipating seeing negative numbers, so the normal numbers are already going to be climbing higher and higher, and it's not conducive for healing. It's not conducive for convincing your subconscious that you don't have any kind of issues. And if you are somebody that's checking that, I understand that, because I went through actually multiple phases where I would check it too. I went through phases where the blood pressure was a huge fear for me, and I would be checking my blood pressure. Sometimes I had my sister bring over a blood pressure cuff so that I could check blood pressure. I had a fear about that. I, of course, had the heart rate fears where I had a pulse ox. I was always putting it on my finger throughout the day and checking what my pulse was. And I had never cared before. Like when I had gotten COVID, this is going back almost 2 years now. When I've gotten COVID for the first time, might have had it the second time, I don't know. When I got it the first time, I remember them, they were swarming. The media was swarming people with saying, oh, well, oxygen levels, you have to make sure that your oxygen levels stay above a certain point. So I was checking a pulse ox, and I would never really put much stock into heart rate, because I didn't do any research at the time. I didn't look into anything. I had no idea. I mean, essentially, I didn't even know what a normal resting heart rate even was. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't put any kind of stock into it. I didn't notice what mine was at that point or anything. And I think I remember seeing that my resting heart rate was 98, which. Also, if you have COVID, I guess if you're sick, your heart rate does jump up a little bit because your body's fighting things off. I believe that's one of the times where your heart rate jumps up, along with eating and just getting up off the couch and doing certain things that jumpstart your system. But I believe when you're sick and your body's fighting off illnesses, your heart rate can climb up a little bit. But that was the very beginning, and I had no, at that point in time, I wasn't feeling my heart rate. I wasn't feeling my heartbeat. I wasn't feeling anything. That was right before things kind of really took a dive downhill for me, and I started to feel everything. I could feel random, like I could feel heartbeat, like normal heartbeats. Like I know people can say that, oh, well, I can feel ectopics and skipped heartbeats and things like that, which is a lot of like my prior videos have been on like ectopics, because like I was suffering from those and I was having like hundreds of those a day, and I was feeling a lot of them, and it was miserable. Like it was literally miserable, like breakdown miserable. Like I didn't even know if I could freaking like go through life that way. I more power to the people who like have that and they have like thousands a day and they just hike and they live their life to the fullest. Like that was crushing me when that was happening. So like I understand that, and like I was feeling all that, or a good portion of them, and it just got me so sensitized and so focused like on my body that I started to feel just my heartbeat. And like normally I started to notice like if I lay down sometimes, which I haven't heard lately, so I don't know if it's just like calming down or if it's my body kind of desensitizing a little bit, but you can hear like a heartbeat in the left ear. You can feel it if you're laying on your left side. Like I would be in this position where I'd be laying on my left side. I have my hand like on my head, and I would lay there, because at the beginning of my anxiety journey I was afraid to move. Like I was literally afraid to turn over because I felt like my heart was going to stop. It was that bad. Like the cardiophobia was that bad. Like I didn't even have this much gray. I have gray hair, and I didn't have this much gray hair in my beard or anything at the time. So that was not like I laying on my left side. I could feel it in the ribs, and I know as you can say, like you're laying on your left side, you're pushing your heart more toward like the wall of like I guess your rib cage or something like that. So you know it's not exactly unnatural and definitely not like unhealthy or dangerous, but like when you start to feel all these kind of things, like why the hell am I feeling it now? And then the initial and like immediate reaction is like your body just now goes into fight or flight, because you're just on edge all the time, and essentially like any little thing is moving. I know I put this like metaphor or analogy or whatever. It's like if you're holding a pen and you're even keel and you're normal, the pen, it takes a lot more to move the pen. It's you're basically holding it in the middle as an even person, right? But your nervous system is just regulated, and it flip-flop. It goes back and forth depending on stimulation, obviously. But like when you are suffering from an anxiety disorder and you're going through all that kind of stuff, like you're not holding it in the middle anymore. You're holding it down more toward an end, and that just means it takes a lot less for that pen to start to wobble and the needle to move. So you could just, if you feel one thing in your body, all of a sudden, bang, like adrenaline starts to hit you, and your heart rate starts to jump up and your heart rate starts to increase. And now, when you're super fearful of that, and when you're thinking you have a heart problem and all this kind of stuff, it's always gonna, and then you're gonna feel it even more. It's gonna jump even faster, and you could see now how, even though things might, nothing might be wrong with your heart. That's why, in all of my videos, I always tell everybody, and to most people's credit, they usually, like all anxiety channels and things like that, tell you this, that you have to get checked. Like you have to go to the doctor or cardiologist. You have to get the necessary testing done, because until you find out that your heart is overall healthy, you're just never going to be able to accept anything. You're never going to be able to push yourself. You're never going to be able to exercise or do anything to even further convince yourself that you're healthy. You know what I mean? So, you have to do that before you do anything else. So, to jump back in, I started to feel everything. I started to really, I guess, hone in on the fact that every time I looked at my pulse, like it was high. And you can say like 98 is still within the normal resting range, but I would always tell myself that it's too fast. So if 98 is the resting, what's going to happen when I'm getting a little bit anxious, all day long, is it climbing over 100. And then every time I would put a pulse ox to check, I remember putting the blood pressure cuff on, and my blood pressure was more so normal. Maybe a little bit higher, because I was obviously a little anxious and having like a little bit of anticipatory anxiety. Like I was expecting my numbers to be through the roof. So I know that my heart rate probably climbed up a little bit. But like it was still like 98 the first time I checked it, And then the second time I checked it, it was like 102. And I'm sitting there like I'm having a more like a passionate conversation over the phone with somebody. So maybe that even jumped it up a little bit. I don't know. But almost like ever since then, that became like the biggest fear, especially when the ectopic heartbeats and the skipped heartbeats and stuff started to slow down for me. And eventually they kind of faded away. Like now, if I have a day where I'm really anxious, like yesterday I went to the dentist to have a cleaning done, and I was still insanely anxious when I'm sitting there in a chair. Like I still have, I know you can say what, like I have white coat hypertension, like I have a really bad white coat when I go into a doctor's office. But I think any kind of office setting like that is now something that's foreign to me, like even though it never used to be and I never used to care. But I associate everything like that, like, oh my God, they're going to take my pulse. Like, oh my God, they're going to... Subconsciously, that's a big block for me still. So that's something that still obviously has to be worked on. And even the fears of like higher resting heart rate and stuff like that is still something that pops into my mind. And I still think, oh my God, like, what is it? Is it high? Like now it's easier to catch myself. And now the thought or the feeling maybe of feeling my pulse, say if I run, if I go for a jog, and like I can feel my heartbeat sometimes when I'm finished, because now, I'm out of shape. I'm not in that great of cardiovascular shape. So to me, it's like, I guess it's somewhat understandable as to why like I would feel it, plus the sensitization that I've had for the past like year and a half, 2 years now. It just makes some sense as to why like I can feel it, especially when I'm exercising and my heart's going pretty good after like a little jog or 5 minutes worth of like jumping jacks or jogging, anything like that. So it just like, again, that kind of makes sense, but the fear is still like so deeply ingrained in me that I still think about it, subconsciously, and wonder what my heart is doing. And it gets to the point where you think it's always fast, and I think that mine is always kind of fast, like always in the 90s, the 90s or the upper 90s, and sometimes obviously over 100. So then it gets to the point where if you feel your pulse, and your pulse is in the 80s, which is something that I always told myself, I say, I wish that I could just have my pulse be 85 just all day long. And I don't have to worry about anything. And then like when I wake up, it's like obviously lower than that because your body's finally like resting, So then when you actually feel your pulse and your pulse is slower, at least this is what happened with me. And it was a huge setback for me. When it actually was lower, I freaked out because I was like, why isn't it fast now? Is this the heart failure? Is this like heart disease? Is this like the early stages of something? Is something going on? Even, I remember going to the cardiologist, having all my testing done. And they said, listen, everything is good with your heart. We did every test that we actually possibly could. We did like the EKGs, the echoes, the calcium scores, stress tests. Like we did every test that we could. And there's literally nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with your heart. You're a healthy, normal person. Go out and like live your life now. And basically come back in 8 years. We don't want to see you, which is what they told me. But I went back. It was like we don't want to see you for 8 years. You're fine. Which still didn't convince me, by the way, because I went to see another one after that. So when it was slower, and when I would go outside, I remember actually trying to push myself. When I started to push myself in exercise, I would jog, and I didn't feel anything. Like I didn't feel my heart beating. I would be out of breath. I would be winded, but I didn't feel anything. And that sent me down another spiral because I was like, something's got to be wrong now. If nothing was wrong before and I could feel it, something's got to be wrong now and I don't feel it. And you could see just like you just open a whole can of worms and where you're never happy with anything. So like you're not happy with feeling it and feeling, the palpitations. And then you go to the doctor and you go to the cardiologist and you get the tests run. They're like, everything is fine. There's nothing going on with you. And then when you don't feel it, you're right back to, like for me, I was right back in the cardiologist's office saying, I'm running and I don't feel anything. why? Like, what's wrong now? And that's when they're like, listen, that's normal. You know what I mean? Like, it's normal not to. And my very best friend, who's like, of my brother, essentially, he has always been a hockey player. And I actually had him check before. I was like, when you do anything, when you exercise, when you do anything like that, like, do you feel your heart beating at all? Like, do you know what's going on? And he was like, no. And actually, just like now, because he still remembered me asking him this question, he actually went and played in a hockey tournament. And he was like, I actually went and played in an adult hockey tournament for charity. He's like, and we played like 3 games over the course of the last weekend. And he's like, I never felt my heart beat once. He's like, I'm out of breath when I get off the ice and my shift is over and all that kind of stuff. I'm out of breath, but I don't feel it at all. And it's still weird for me, even though I'm like in a much better state of mind and much better in terms of handling anxiety and fears and all that kind of stuff as I was before. I still go through phases where like I can feel it, and then I go into other phases where I can't feel it, and it still gives me like, I don't know the term for it, the willies or the heebie-jeebies or whatever you want to call it. It still kind of freaks me out a little bit from when I can feel it, because I've gotten so used to it, and that being like the normal, to whether it's desensitization or whatever it is, to not feeling it, that's also instills like the same kind of response, because it brings up memories of times where when my body was fully silent and I couldn't feel anything, it was almost like that was doom, like that was impending doom on me. Everything would be like my basically like my heart's just going to stop. So if that's something that somebody else feels, actually, because I had a hard time explaining that to people, like actually when you went from feeling a heartbeat, feeling high heart rate, knowing what your pulse is, to then kind of having things slow down a little bit and then not feeling it, to thinking like, oh my God, my heart's going to stop. Like that's like and that would be like impending doom for me. That would be that feeling like everything was just like kind of closing in. So if that's something that anybody who watches this, if that's something that you've come across, if that's something you felt or feeling, obviously you're not alone with that, but let me know in the comments, because I haven't come across many people who have had that. I know people who have had the heart fears over just a low overall, like heart rate, resting heart rate and things like that, but not really someone who has had, I guess it's a sensitivity kind of peaks and valleys where you feel some things, you're sensitized to it, you feel a lot of things, and then you go from feeling it to like not feeling it. Maybe your body starts to desensitize a little bit, but you're so used to it. Or maybe it's an addiction to the suffering and the addiction to the sensitivity, to where if you don't start to feel it, you think that something's wrong, and you're like, oh my, like I'd rather feel it. And you can see how like it's just a constant kind of cycle, and it keeps you trapped, because you're always on the lookout for something. You're always like, overly focused on your body and paying attention to that kind of stuff, and it's taken away from the present, like, the present moment or whatever. Like I could sit here and be like, I'm just focused on my heart or my heart rate. Do I feel it? What is it? And I'm not paying attention to anything. Sunlight, birds, clouds, like it's a beautiful day, like the weather's perfect, there's a little breeze, and I wouldn't be paying attention to any of it because I'm focused on my chest. So if that's something that you can relate to, then just again let me know. And I guess to go over numbers now, again, like I don't know what my heart rate is, because I kind of just refuse to check. There are times when I still want to, but I just don't do it, because like I had such bad anticipatory anxiety that I still know if I wanted to check my own, it would jump up, and it would go from maybe even in the 80s. Within a couple seconds, it would probably be in the 90s. And who knows, if it wasn't even that fast, that might still make me a little bit weary, or bring thoughts back in like something's wrong. But I know at the end of the day that I can exercise. I could go for a walk and have conversations like this and have talks for 20 minutes now and like I'm fine, right? Whereas if somebody had like a major issue, they wouldn't even be able to do that. So like I could just convince myself, plus all the testing that I have had done, nothing's going to happen within 8 months, you know what I mean, of not having any problems with your heart to, you know, being in advanced stages of, you know, heart failure or something. Not something to trigger anybody, but the advanced stages of that, like it doesn't happen that way. Like it takes years. And I've had multiple cardiologists tell me that, you know, if you have a 0 calcium score and everything comes back good on like an echo, you're good for at least 5 years. Like you really don't have many risks for at least like the next 5 years of something happening. You know, granted, yeah, anything can happen at any time, but there's really not much that can be done. But you just fall into the pattern of trying to prevent everything, and become overly precautious that it just cuts away from everything. Because I still notice it. Like I can go months where I'm fine and I can exercise and I'm feeling like on top of the world, basically. And then there's little periods or funks, I guess you could call them. You call them setbacks if you want to, where I can go back into, I guess, overly focus and convince myself that there's a problem, or convince myself that I can't feel my heart rate and that that's something that should be worried over. I just don't let it stop me in my tracks like I used to. It doesn't keep me in like a state of fear and panic like it used to all the time. But again, like my numbers were always in the 90s. I remember literally one time in the evening when my body was like calm and relaxed, when I looked at like a pulse ox and it was 77. I even screenshot it and sent it to my friend, like, oh my God, I'm not dying. Like, because I was so used to like, I guess fearing high numbers and seeing high numbers at the one time that it wasn't. I was like, oh my God, like everybody's right, there's probably no problem. But again, like it just jumps up and down. And I know that like on the DARE app, if anybody listens to the DARE app, they say like, you know, your heart's not an atomic clock or whatever. It doesn't keep a perfect heartbeat all the time. Just don't pay attention to it. Don't try to control it. It speeds up, it slows down. It's doing whatever it's got to do based on your surroundings and, you know, the environment. And it's just doing, you know, it's just responding in kind to what your subconscious and what the environment is filling with. Jesus, ambulance, I guess, driving around here. Apologies. So anyway, that was like one time. But other than that, you know, every time I used to check it, it was at least 90. I mean, most of the time when I checked it, it was in the 90s, the upper 80s to the 90s, and it was kind of crazy because when I would check it, it would always be like in the upper 80s, which normally I would be fine with. You know what I mean? I would be fine with anything. To me personally, like I'd be fine with anything under 90 for the most part. But when I would check it, it would be at that number, and then it would just consistently go up. It would just go up. It would be 80, like, you know, 85 to 90, somewhere in between there. And then it would be 92, and then it would be 95. So before you know it, like, you're just going. And you don't have to do anything in order for your mind to just be like, bam, anxiety kind of hits you, and maybe some stress hormones and things some processes start to go along in your body, and, you know, your heart rate picks up a little bit. And that's why when I got so used to it, actually, before I get into that, I'll say, like, when I used to go to the doctors, forget about it. Like my heart rate would be through the roof. Like it would just skyrocket. I think I've never been in a doctor's office where my heart rate was under 115, 120, ever. I remember even going for my stress test. It was 122 when they first were checking it. And they're like, they're like, you have to calm down a little bit. I can't even give you the stress test because it's not going to do anything. You're already at like one of the stages that we want to get you to. Your heart's already going that way. And it's weird, like once you actually start to exercise, like your heart rate doesn't climb up anymore. It's just like there. It's already there. So like I think the worst I ever had was in like I woke up, most of my panic attacks were nocturnal. I think I said that in another video. Like most of them were nocturnal. So I would wake up in a panic, and I think my heart rate was 150. I think that was the highest I've ever seen my heart. Like I don't check it when I exercise, when I'm done exercising, anything like that. But 155-ish, I think was the highest it's ever been. And I know people who have had panic attacks, and they've said that they've had heart rates in the 180s, or maybe even higher. But I don't know. I haven't had it that way, so I guess it's something to be positive about. So like anywhere in between there. So you know, when you're anxious and your nervous system and you're essentially sympathetic, your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, when you're like always out of whack and misaligned, it just doesn't take much for your heart rate to increase and kind of always be a little bit higher, because especially when you're anxious, a lot of times you're always edgy, and when you're always edgy, your subconscious is always kind of going, and you're never really balanced, and you're never really calm. You just get so used to it, and your body gets so used to like those flooding of those stress hormones that's just the norm. And this was the case with me. But eventually you get to a point where your body just, as you start to get a little bit older, like your body just doesn't handle it as well anymore. And I think that's why you can kind of go on little amounts of sleep and things like that when you're younger. And now, like, as you get older, sleep becomes more and more of like an important priority. And if you don't get enough of it, your body really starts to suffer and kind of break down. And I think that might have also been like the main like precursor to my whole thing was the sleep apnea. When I started to gain a lot of weight, that my sleep was just really, it just wasn't restful, I guess, anymore. I didn't rejuvenate or replenish anything because you just don't get deep sleep. So I think that also, like, my body couldn't fight things off anymore. I was probably running on fumes with COVID. So that this is probably had something to do with the result, and then everything just kind of spiraled. So like I had readings anywhere from usually the mid to upper 90s whenever I used to check it, all the way up to like 150 if I was in panic mode. Now I don't know what it is when I'm resting, all that kind of stuff, because I don't really ever check it. There are some times, like the most recent time, like when I was laying down, because now I've gotten to the point also when I was really anxious that I could feel my pulse in random parts of my body that I didn't even know you could before. Like if I'm laying down, if I have my hand here, I can feel my pulse on by my temple, at the top of my head, sometimes behind like I'm feeling it everywhere, like on my arms, sometimes on my legs, depending on where, like how I'm laying and what I'm feeling. And subconsciously, I still kind of, I guess, look out for that. But it was lower than what I thought it would be. And it was probably, if I had to guess, I did get pretty good at guesstimating what my pulse was just by feeling it, like feeling like 2 beats of it or whatever. So I would guess it would probably be in the 80s if I had to throw a guess out there. And I remember that kind of freaked me out, and that put me back into a little bit of a state of the impending kind of doom feelings, where it's like it's slower. I feel like I'm a little bit anxious, and I feel like it should be faster, and it's not. Does that mean that there's something wrong? But that's the subconscious thought process. But just like the flip side of that is, like, I've felt it before. I've had those feelings before. I've had the exact same thing happen before, to the point where I went on forums and was saying, does anybody feel anxious but their heart rate doesn't jump through the roof? Like, is that a thing? And some people, there were a couple people who did say, yeah, like I deal with that now. And I don't know if that's, again, desensitization. You could be a little bit nervous. Your nervous system could be going a little bit, but your heart rate isn't just getting shot up with like adrenaline or, whatever stress hormone that might be firing off in your body. So maybe that's a thing, maybe again, with the, what I did essentially was, okay, so if I'm fearing high heart rate, what can I do about that? Like if I'm fearing having a high resting heart rate, okay, how can you lower high resting heart rate? Dietary, You can lose weight, which again, I've lost like 65 pounds. So that's something that you could do, is you can lose weight. So check your diet, which again is a lifestyle change. It's in a couple of my other videos. If you're somebody that's on a standard American diet, be real with yourself. If you're someone who is obese, overweight, that's area number one that can be fixed immediately. Change your diet, give yourself a couple of weeks to a few months, and you'll see changes in that. You'll see weight, see the pounds kind of shredding away. On top of that, the exercise. I think I read if you exercise, I think it was the equivalent of like 15 minutes a day, 15, 20, like anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes a day, depending on how strenuous the exercise was. Within like 3 to 4 weeks, like your heart rate should drop like 1 beat per minute or something like that. So the better shape that you're in, it makes sense too. The better cardiovascular fitness level that you have, the lower your heart will beat. It doesn't need to overwork. I mean, you could look at athletes as an example that they notoriously have low resting heart rates because their hearts are stronger. So it's like their heart rates, I think, can even get into the 50s and 60s. I know the 60s for sure, but maybe even the 50s, depending on how physically fit they are. So that's something that you can strive for. It doesn't have to be at that level, but the better shape you're in, obviously the lower your heart rate's going to get. Also with the diet too, I was somebody who was big on caffeine and sugar. So if you're somebody who has a lot of caffeine and a lot of sugar in your diet, get rid of it. That's also going to jump your heart rate artificially. And that stuff lasts in your body for 11 hours. You know what I mean? So if you're somebody who drinks a coffee a day or 2 coffees plus a day, that's going to impact your overall heart rate. Caffeine has a big impact on it. And some people are very sensitive to caffeine. I was, to where that was the first time I ever felt palpitations when I was drinking coffee. And I had never drank coffee my entire life because I hated the taste. But I started to drink it because I was like, oh, French vanilla, I like vanilla. So I started to drink that, and that's when I started to feel like some flutters and some skips. And that's initially what started me with a little bit of anxiety like 10 years ago. Obviously things didn't blow up at that point, but it was a precursor to like what happened to me like 2 years ago. So caffeine and sugar, get them out of your diet. They don't serve any purpose. If you need caffeine because you're so exhausted, there's got to be another area of your life that's lacking. Your sleep, first and foremost, is probably lacking. Well, you're not getting 8 hours. You're not getting quality 8 hours. Are you watching TV before you go to bed? Right up until you go to bed, they have the blue light in your eyes, which is not setting your sleep cycle. You're not getting enough sun. You have a desk job. There's a lot of things that can go into that. Sleep apnea is a potential. Things that can be rectified and things that can be cleared up if you do it. So it's just stuff like, look into all that kind of stuff. I guess that's, over time that'll help you get better. But I think that's probably all I have to say on that. Like, I know most of my videos go a little bit longer because I just don't want to condense such like important topics into 5-minute videos. I think there's so much stuff gets left out. If you're somebody who's suffering from this and who doesn't know what can cause it or why this stuff is happening, and you're searching for answers and you come across somebody who has been through like exactly the same thing, and you have an attention span of 3 minutes and you don't find a quick answer like that in like 3-4 minutes, then I'm not the guy that's going to help you. I would watch videos for hours. Like, if that would help me, all my day was basically filled up with videos of anxiety stuff, like recoverers and people who try to help others with anxiety. I wouldn't care if it was 4 minutes or 44 minutes. I actually like to go back to the ones that are longer time because they have more information in there. There's more to relate to. There's more that I can connect with, and there's more likely, oh, damn, okay, so like I could do that. That sounds exactly like me. Not something that's 3 minutes, maybe a little tip, and then you're out. That doesn't help. That's not going to help anybody, in my opinion. Maybe some videos are good like that, but for the most part, it's not. So anyway, like I appreciate everybody who watches my videos. If you make it to the end of my videos, please comment. Let me know that you actually do watch the entire video. And if you have questions or comments or anything like that, I know some people, comment on a lot of the videos, especially with the ectopics and the cardiophobia. Feel free. I love to hear from people. I love to try to help anybody as best as I can. And whenever these things pop in my mind, I want to be quick to just record what I'm thinking. A lot of my videos are just, raw and usually kind of unedited. Like this is probably not going to be edited. I just came outside for a walk and I'm just recording. So if you have any questions, if anything like you relate to, let me know. If you have, cardiophobia, if you suffer from heart anxiety and you have anything that you are concerned about, maybe you haven't come across in one of my videos that you've watched or anybody else's videos, feel free to ask it. I did a lot of research into it, which is not good, especially when you're in this mindset, because you just most of the time, you're not going to have any kind of heart condition or illness or anything like that you have to deal with. But you find out about so many different conditions and illnesses that you start to believe that you have them, because a lot of the symptoms and things are similar, very similar. And you fall into that trap. So you might not have even known about a certain condition. This happened with me numerous times with numerous conditions. I didn't even know these things existed. But then upon reading about them and learning a little bit about them, I was like, this symptom sounds about right. And I thought I had this, and I thought I had that. And then I was back to the cardiologist. Do I have this? Do I have that? So just stay away from it. If you have any questions, please feel free again to ask. And let me know if you made it through the end. I greatly appreciate every viewer, every subscriber that I get. And thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video.